Her name was Katerina, a young maid, a prisoner of war. The war Peter the Great waged against the mighty Swedish Empire. Within 10 years, Katerina would wear the imperial crown of Russia. Royal Romances presents the true story of Tsar Peter the Great and his Cinderella wife. Tsar Peter the Great, a 24-year-old giant, was leading his armies across northern Europe. In an early campaign, his field marshal captured a small Swedish fortress town. Several hundred people who lived within its walls were taken prisoner. Was it a great victory? Not at all. Then why mention it? Because among the captives was a certain Pastor Gluck and his maid, Katerina. What made the Russian field marshal notice her in that crowd? Katerina was in her late teens, petite, full-figured, blonde, with dark velvety eyes. Pretty, but not a beauty. Nothing remarkable about her. Yet, he asked about the girl. "She's a foundling," the pastor explained. Both her parents were dead. He had found her at an orphanage when she was about 8 and had taken her in. Katerina looked after his children, did the laundry, and cooked for the family. She was illiterate, and really, why would a maid need to know how to read or write 300 years ago? The field marshal, a 50-year-old war veteran, decided to keep Katerina. Was she frightened? Did she cry? What kind of a relationship did they have? Some say she had been briefly married to a Swedish soldier before her capture, but no one knows if that's true. What we do know is that a few months later, Peter's friend Alexashka came to stay with the field marshal. And guess what? He noticed Katerina too. And not just noticed, Alexashka decided to take her with him. Now the field marshal was old nobility, and Alexashka had once sold pies and worked as a stable boy. But he had become the Tsar's best friend, and you didn't say no to the Tsar's bestie. So Alexashka left the field marshal's house with Katerina. A contemporary wrote that she didn't just join Alexashka's household, she moved straight into his heart. They shared humble beginnings, and that simple bond held them together for life. He was young, full of mischief, and knew how to have a good time. Katerina was happy in his house. But fate wasn't done with this young woman. Not yet. Before long, Tsar Peter came to spend the night at Alexashka's. And, wouldn't you know it, he noticed Katerina, who served at the table. They exchanged a few words. Our Tsar was never big on royal protocol. Later that night, when he went to bed, he asked her to bring a candle to his room. In the morning, Peter gave Katerina a coin for her services. As usual, not much. The Tsar was famously stingy when the expense wasn't for the state. An encounter between the mighty Tsar and a lowly maid. What a cliché. But be patient, my friends. Katerina's story will soon outshine that of her fictitious counterpart, a young woman named Cinderella. When they first met, Peter, our Prince Charming, considered himself single since his wife Eudoxia had become a nun. He'd married her at 17, a union of convenience arranged by his mother. Peter needed a son to secure the throne, and Eudoxia, bless her heart, gave him not one but 2 boys. Only the eldest, Alexei, survived infancy. Eudoxia bored Peter. He was in love with Anna Mons, the beautiful daughter of a German wine merchant. Unlike the pious Eudoxia, Anna was a free spirit. Eudoxia begged Peter to show more stately behavior, but he soon had enough of her pleas and ordered her to move into a convent. The meek Eudoxia protested. She and Peter had been married before God. She was raising their son. Besides, she had no desire to become a nun. Peter was enraged by her insubordination. How dare she contradict him, her husband, and her sovereign? On his orders, Eudoxia was separated from 8-year-old Alexei and sent to a remote convent. Under duress, she took the veil and became Sister Elena. From time to time, she wrote to Peter, humbly asking for provisions. He never replied. He didn't care if the mother of his child starved to death. With Eudoxia out of the way, the Tsar began to toy with the idea of making Anna Mons an honest woman. The church would never allow him to wed a foreigner and a Protestant. He might as well have married Satan's own daughter. But Peter took delight in mocking the church. Yet even an autocrat as powerful as Peter could not control what fate had in store for him. One cold April day, a certain German envoy drowned in the Neva River. The accident seemed trivial, except for one detail. Among the envoy's personal effects were love letters from Anna Mons and a locket with her portrait. We can only imagine what kind of expletives the Tsar blurted upon hearing the news. Anna was placed under house arrest. Peter was done with her. But heartbreak didn't slow him down. The Tsar was notorious for his sexual appetite. Like rulers in every age, he believed all women were fair game. In every town and every village, there was a woman who would bring a candle to his bedroom. Why then did the Tsar return to Alexashka's house and claim Katerina as his mistress? What was it about her that made him think she could fill the vacancy in his broken heart? Perhaps we'll never know. What we do know is that the former maid studied Russian, learned court manners, and bore Peter 2 sons, both of whom died in infancy. 3 daughters followed. And what did Peter do? He kept fighting his war. He wrote to Katerina. Though her guardians had to read and answer the letters, she still couldn't read or write. At first, the Tsar's notes sounded more like military orders. Leave at once and write to such and such encampment. No matter the weather, no matter that she was pregnant, and most of the time she was, Katerina would rush to him. Sometimes the roads were so bad she had to leave the carriage and go on horseback or even on foot. Sometimes there were no roads at all. Nothing could keep her away from Peter. As time marched on, the Tsar's letters began to fill with tenderness. My dear friend, my darling Katerina. That's how he started them now. Peter enjoyed having her by his side. She stayed in the saddle for days, slept in tents, ate army rations, and poured vodka for the soldiers to keep up their strength. She washed and mended Peter's clothes, doing every chore willingly and with joy. Never a word of complaint from her. Katerina was always cheerful and forgiving. When the Tsar was seized by his notorious fits of rage, when a tic pulled his face into a wicked grimace and convulsions twisted his body, his entire entourage of senators, ministers, and generals did not run for cover. They ran to find Katerina. Why? Because the mere sound of her voice was enough to calm Peter down. She would lay him on a couch, rest his head on her lap, and run her fingers through his hair until he fell asleep. She sat like that for hours, waiting until he woke, calm and whole again. Her gentle face was the first thing the Tsar saw when he opened his eyes. Katerina became Peter's soulmate. He shared his triumphs and his sorrows with her. He missed her whenever they were apart. She listened and soothed, encouraged and comforted, inspired and filled him with confidence. Peter knew he had found his perfect woman, a caring maid, a passionate mistress, and a loving mother, all in one. 4 years after their first encounter, Peter married Katerina in a secret ceremony. Before setting out on his campaign against the Ottoman Empire, Peter told his sister that he intended to marry Katerina officially, but if he died in battle, she was to be treated as his lawful widow. Peter's crusade against the Turks turned into a disaster. The Russian army was surrounded, and the Tsar was on the verge of capture. Legend has it that Katerina, who had followed Peter on this perilous campaign while 7 months pregnant, offered the Turkish commander all her jewels to secure a peace treaty. While this selfless act was most likely a tall tale, peace was secured and Peter, unharmed, returned to Russia. Soon afterward, Katerina was baptized into the Russian Orthodox faith and became Catherine. Alexei, Peter's son from his first marriage, stood as her godfather. True to his word, Peter then married Catherine officially. The couple's 2 little daughters, Anna and Elizabeth, 5 and 3 years old, served as Catherine's bridesmaids. After the ceremony, the wedding party rode from the church to the palace in an open sleigh to the sound of trumpets and drums. The wedding guests were treated to a lavish banquet, followed by a ball and fireworks. The Tsar proudly told foreign ambassadors that his union had already been blessed with 5 children. Sadly, by then 3 were dead. But Peter's eldest son, Alexei, the same young man who had just served as Catherine's godfather, was alive and well. Why wasn't he invited to the wedding? Here begins the most tragic father and son story. After Peter separated 8-year-old Alexei from his mother, he placed him, practically an orphan, in the care of relatives the boy hardly knew. At 16, Alexei went to visit his mother at the convent. When Peter found out about it, he immediately suspected a secret plot and confronted his son. Alexei did what would soon become customary in their relationship. He begged his father for forgiveness and promised to do better. It's hard to imagine 2 people more different than the Tsar and his firstborn. Peter loved war. Alexei despised it. Peter mocked the church. Alexei found comfort in faith. Peter was decisive. Alexei hesitated. The Tsar brutally forced Western reforms on his subjects, while Alexei believed that Russia was better off without European influence. Hoping to cure his son of this belief, Peter married him to a 16-year-old German princess named Charlotte. But like his father in his first marriage, Alexei ignored and mistreated his wife. He even brought his mistress, Frossi, a peasant serf girl, to live under the same roof. Poor Charlotte died after giving birth to their second child, a boy named Peter. You'd think the Tsar would be thrilled to have a grandson, a namesake to carry on the Romanov line. But almost at the same time, his wife Catherine gave birth to a baby boy whom they named, have you guessed? Also Peter. After Alexei and his newborn son, this little bundle of joy was now 3rd in the line of succession. Did Catherine express any concerns about how she and this child would be treated if Alexei came to power? Or did Peter draw his own conclusions? There were now too many contenders for the crown, 2 from the woman he despised, the 3rd from the woman he adored. Alexei had just returned from Charlotte's funeral when he received a letter from his father. In it, the Tsar accused him of being idle and weak. Peter wrote that Alexei lacked the fire in his belly and should therefore renounce his right to the throne. Alexei knew better than to poke the enraged Papa Bear. He wrote back that he was sickly and weak and unworthy of the throne. Let his father's newborn son be the heir. All Alexei wanted was to live with his Frossi in some quiet village far from Peter's newly minted capital, St. Petersburg. Grant him a small pension, and he'd trouble no one again. Out of sight, out of mind? Peter didn't think so. A quiet village life wasn't going to strip Alexei of his hereditary rights. The Tsar demanded that his son join him in battle against the Swedes, or take holy orders and become a monk. Alexei felt cornered. He wanted neither war nor a monastery away from his Frossi. So he gathered what money he could and fled to Austria, where he asked the emperor for asylum. It's hard to say whether Peter was more humiliated or infuriated when he learned about Alexei's flight. Before too long, his loyal envoys tracked him down and handed him a letter from his father. In it, the Tsar scolded his wayward son, but promised a full pardon if he returned. The envoys bribed and coaxed Frossi into persuading Alexei to return home. When Alexei was assured that once back in Russia, he'd be allowed to marry Frossi, he gave in. Upon hearing the news, one nobleman wrote to a friend, "Have you heard that this fool of an heir is coming here because his father allowed him to marry Frossi? He will have a coffin instead of a wedding." The prediction was spot on. As soon as Alexei returned, Peter publicly denounced and disinherited him. His and Catherine's little boy, 2-year-old Peter, was proclaimed heir to the throne. Alexei's pardon was no longer unconditional. It now depended on him revealing every accomplice involved in this so-called conspiracy. Peter personally wrote the script for his son's interrogations. Alexei was to be treated as a common traitor, not as an heir to the throne. At first, he named only those who had helped him with money. No good deed goes unpunished, does it? But soon, under the threat of torture, he betrayed everyone he had ever spoken to about his father. Everyone except one person, Frossi. The Tsar raved and raged. Tortures and executions went far beyond Alexei's list. Peter demanded to know whether Eudoxia, the wife he had banished to a convent 2 decades earlier, had helped her son escape. The envoy reported that she had not, but there was other incriminating evidence against her. Eudoxia, it turned out, had taken off the veil and was living at the convent as a laywoman. Worse still, she had fallen in love with an army officer sent to the area to recruit soldiers. Why would Peter care about such trivial matters? After all, Eudoxia was his ex, and he was a happily married man. But Peter did care, deeply. She was meant to suffer, not to enjoy life. He had both lovers arrested. Eudoxia was interrogated and sent to a distant convent, where she remained under strict supervision. Her lover was tortured in the most sadistic ways and then impaled on a wooden stake. The executioners were ordered to avoid damaging vital organs, to prolong his agony. It took the stoic man 14 hours to die. But Peter was not finished. He personally interrogated Alexei, and then Frossi. Had Alexei ever said anything compromising about his father? What were his words? What were his thoughts? Without any torture, Frossi readily stated that Alexei disapproved of his father's ways and wished him dead. Atta girl, Frossi. Alexei was immediately arrested and, on Peter's orders, tortured and sentenced to death. He begged to see his father one last time. Before Peter made it to the fortress where his son waited to be executed, Alexei was dead. There are many theories about his death, from apoplexy to being poisoned and even beheaded. But the simplest explanation is this: the torture he endured, 25 brutal whiplashes, with 15 more to follow before the first wounds could even close, was enough to kill a healthy man. And Alexei by then was terribly ill, in body and in mind. Russian history had already known one Tsar, Ivan the Terrible, who killed his own son. Terrible indeed, wasn't he? But Ivan's was a crime of passion. Peter the Great murdered his son in cold blood. My friends, call it God or fate or karma, call it whatever you like, but I have to tell you, the universe seeks balance. Or in simpler terms, it seeks to right the wrongs. Little Peter, the new heir, soon died. Tsar Peter and his wife, Catherine, had no more sons. Out of their 12 children, only 2 daughters survived. No sons? No worries. Peter quickly found a way to deal with this predicament. Why should the throne necessarily go to a royal male? Peter broke with the ancient tradition and issued a decree that allowed him to choose his own successor. By then, he had defeated the Swedish Empire. He had gained access to the sea, secured Baltic territories, and founded St. Petersburg, his new capital. Peter had shown the whole world the might of Russia's army and her fleet. He could have proudly echoed Machiavelli. It is better to be feared than loved, if you cannot be both. Russia was now an empire. Peter was proclaimed emperor and became known as Peter the Great. And then this great, fearsome monarch did the unthinkable. He decided to crown his wife. The poor foundling of dubious origins would no longer be a czarina and consort. She would become a full-fledged Russian empress, Peter's co-ruler. Peter waited for objections, but there was no one left to object. He had exterminated all opposition. Those who survived didn't dare make a sound. Russia had never seen a more glorious coronation. This time, Peter chose to honor ancient custom and held it in Moscow in the Kremlin. The emperor was stingy no more. The mantle, ordered from Paris, was so heavy that Catherine had to stop and catch her breath as she walked. The crown, crafted by a St. Petersburg jeweler, was studded with more than 2,000 diamonds and other precious stones. At its center gleamed a ruby the size of a pigeon's egg. When Peter placed the crown on her head, Catherine knelt before him. She tried to kiss his hand and embrace his knees, but he lifted her up. Everyone was to swear an oath to the new empress. Everyone who wished to live. Feasts and celebrations followed, lasting for days on end. The former maid had become the most powerful woman in the largest empire in Europe. They lived happily ever after is not exactly how our Cinderella story ends. Within a few weeks, Catherine's handsome valet, William Mons, was found guilty of corruption and embezzlement. The name Mons sounds familiar, doesn't it? Of course it does. William was the younger brother of Anna Mons, Peter's once beloved, cheating lover. There were rumors that William was having an affair with Catherine, but the gossip never reached Peter's ears. In his rage, he would have killed the messenger. No one was eager to deliver the dubious news and die for it. William and Catherine were never formally accused of adultery, but Mons's corruption charges were enough to plant a seed of doubt in Peter's suspicious mind. Did Catherine know about his crimes and try to shield him? Will she let swindlers like Mons plunder the empire once Peter was gone? Peter had good reason to worry. He had been ill for some time and was growing weaker by the day. The emperor spared Mons the torture chamber and ordered a swift beheading. On the day of the execution, Catherine and her 2 daughters were taking a lesson with their dance master. Her relationship with Peter had grown strained, but she was eager to show contrition and reconcile with him. Would they have rekindled their romance? We shall never know. Peter's kidney disease had drained him of all strength. In terrible agony, he asked for a writing tablet and managed to scribble, "Give everything to..." Death didn't let him finish. Peter stepped into eternity without naming a successor. He had killed his son and no longer trusted his wife. Peter's guards regiments, the men he loved and trusted, the men Catherine had encouraged with kind words and vodka, allowed no opposition from the old nobility. They proclaimed the former maid Empress of Russia. "Dear Mother Empress," they called her lovingly. Catherine ruled for only 2 years before death claimed her soul. One historian wrote, "She was nothing but a vine wrapped around a mighty oak. Once the oak fell, the vine withered and died." A mighty oak and a limber vine, the power of strength and the will to yield. Is this what makes unions last? Peter and Catherine's empire would stand for 2 more centuries, and their blood will flow through the veins of 10 generations of Romanovs, the blood of a Tsar and the most remarkable Cinderella. Historians still argue about her origins, and even about her real name. Thank you for listening, dear friends. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave us a great review, share it with others, and post about it on social media. Subscribe to hear about upcoming releases and visit www.royalromances.com for more tales and beautiful images. I look forward to hearing from you. May your days be filled with joy and wonder. Until we meet again, be well.